Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. My name is Tate. I'm joined today with Chris, and we are going to be reviewing Season 5 of Bojack Horseman, the critically acclaimed Netflix animated drama comedy. It kind of blends a lot of genres together. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing very well. And as groundbreaking and prolific as this animated Netflix series is, I actually haven't seen this particular series. We've done reviews on, I want to see the previous
we reviewed series 1 to 3. We also did a separate one for series 4 when it came out. And this time you obviously hadn't had enough time to watch through series 5. I, however, have seen it twice through. I saw it first through, which was what I'm going to call the Bojack experience.
I was going to say you did like straight up method acting right there when you was watching it.
The first time through of watching this series of Bojack, I did the Bojack experience, which was blind drunk. Did the entire series in one day. Went through almost 2 bottles of vodka with a mate. It was quite fun. In the end,
the greatest drunk watch along of Cinema Savvy no one will ever see.
And then the second time through, in the following week, I ended up watching back through all of the episodes again. And I have to say, I'd say it was on par with its strongest season. I still think that season 4 is its strongest season to date. I really enjoyed season 4. I know that you didn't enjoy season 4 as much as you did series 3. But this TV show is amazing. I haven't seen a TV show that has been given this much acclaim over this many series. So the first series, I think, got something like 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and every series since then has been given 100%. I don't think a TV show has done anything like that before, especially a Netflix one, where Netflix don't have that strong a lineup of TV shows. You've got the Marvel ones, which were good for their first series, and I've heard that their quality has dropped off with later on series. You have Stranger Things, which was once again good for its first series, but then maybe dropped off a little bit in its second series. You've also got the likes of new shows coming forward. I've also watched through American Vandal series 2, which I quite enjoyed. That's a show which I'd probably like to see a series 3 of. I've started watching through the new limited series Maniac, starring Emma Stone and is it Jonah Hill? I want to say it's Jonah. Yeah. Which is a bit weird and wacky and maybe a bit too out there for me, with the new Bond director at the helm of that one, I believe. But this show has always seemed to be the thing that Netflix can fall back on. It seems to be its flagship kind of pushing it out there show, which really is pushing the boundaries of its own genre. I think it's the best animated show to come out in the last 6 or 7 years, possibly since, I'd say, maybe Futurama even. As far as what it's done. And I know that people will go and say, oh, what about Rick and Morty? No, this show is way better than Rick and Morty in every sense of the word. And we're going to go through, I'm basically going to spoil this straight away for Chris with every single episode. There is going to be a very, very short pretense spoiler-free section before I literally go into every single episode in depth with what happens and how it affected me and how it affects kind of the universe and the storyline that goes on. I'm going to start off by saying in the spoiler-free section that this is the darkest series. This is the most in-depth series. This is the most harrowing series so far. I think it has one of the best episodes possibly put to television. I know we had the episode Fish Out of Water in series 3, I believe it was, where it was almost completely silent, and it is an amazing feat for TV in that episode alone. I think this episode, which we're going to talk about in a bit, possibly one-ups that episode.
Wow. Okay.
And honest to God, I've got to tell you guys to go and watch this series and watch just Bojack all the way through. You don't have to binge the previous series. I think there is some catch-up guides out there. I binged back through the entire thing before going into this series because I'm a little bit more dedicated to it.
Yes.
But honest to God, this is the TV show that is out there right now. And I think they were picked up for a 6th series. I believe.
I think so. I think we've been talking a while because we kind of, I don't know, we may have had the discussion when season 3 came out, but we were kind of discussing whether there is an ending in sight for Bojack.
I'm gonna tell you now. I think there is an end in sight. I think it's either coming series 6 or series 7, based off this series.
Number-wise, I'd kind of like it to be 6. 6 is like a nice round number. 7's a little bit overstaying its welcome, I think. But it is a series where obviously every series tends to have a certain theme or revolves around a certain character or a particular relationship in Bojack's life. The previous series, for example, was his mom. Season 3 was Sarah Lynn, I believe her name was.
Series 3 was Sarah Lynn. Series 2 was, I'd say, Bojack himself and his relationships. Series 1 was Diane.
Yeah, definitely.
This series is not really a person who it's focused around. I'd say, if anything, it was a lot more Diane focused in this series.
Right.
Looking at my notes, I see a lot of Diane written down. But everyone had their own plot lines to deal with in this series. There was a lot of fractures made in series 4. This series starts to try and mend them a little bit. I'd say that the main theme of this series, however, is one word and one word alone, and that is addiction. And it comes in big in this series.
So that leads me on to my next question. I mean, it is kind of unfortunate for me because this is a series I do want to see. I have seen all the previous ones, but obviously it's going to be sport for me right now, but I'm sure I'll check it out anyway. Would you say this is an advancement for Bojack or a regression in terms of his character? And by the sounds of that, I'm guessing it's the latter.
I'd say for the first, let me check, for the first 5 episodes, it's a massive advancement. Then it plateaus, and then in the last 4 episodes, it starts to dip. And I'd say with episode 11 and 12, which are usually the episodes where the most amount of emotions come out, you had in previous series Time's Arrow, which was the Bojack's mum revelation. We've had Downer Ending, where he asked Diane, "Am I a good person?" Which I still think, even though it's series 1 and series 1 isn't held in such high regard to the previous series, that scene is one of the best in the show.
Definitely, yeah. I think that was when you first got me into the show and mentioned it, and I was watching it to do the reviews for the channel. I was sort of messaging back and forward with you, and I remember that distinctly being the first moment where I kind of sat back and went like, wow, like with an animated series, usually in this context, you can maybe not chalk it up to be as dramatic as a live action one, or not give it as much credit for going certain places. But Bojack goes places. Don't let the animal facade fool you. Like, this goes into some very real feelings and addictions and everything.
So to really say, in the final few episodes, it's a nosedive for Bojack.
Wow. Okay, so something big happens around episode 5 then.
No, yeah, episode 5. In fact, what happens in episode 5 just kind of stops the gradual up and just plateaus out. But what happens in episodes 9, 10, 11, and 12 really take Bojack to a different place and take all the other characters to a different place. But that's the end of spoiler free.
Okay.
And now going episode by episode, in depth into what happens with all of these different characters.
So we start off with episode 1, the light bulb scene.
The light bulb scene. This episode, I think, will go down as a very forgettable episode. I think it's a weakness that Bojack still hasn't managed to get around. The first episode of every season seems to be one of the weakest that it goes through. This episode was quite strong. Just a quick refresher, Bojack was going through, he'd just been cast in a show called Filbert, which is like a detective drama. There's a little bit of kind of fun irony to the fact that in one of the previous series, his house was put up for tourism for David Borealis, and the director, Flip, who's played by Rami Malek, so they're getting another brilliant voice actor, says that he bases the set off David Borealis's house when actually it looks exactly the same as Bojack's house, which is quite a good early on joke. This entire episode is about the dynamic between Bojack and the director, Flip. Flip wants his own vision to come to fruition. Bojack wants his own vision to come to fruition. And it comes to a head. Flip pulls rank, and the episode ends with Bojack having to do a scene which he isn't comfortable with, which is him getting naked and basically twisting a light bulb, but not twisting like that, actually having to spin around in a circle, basically having to jump for a hoop. which he hadn't previously done because he's always been the top dog, the star. When it was Herb who was commanding him what to do on horsing around, Bojack would always pull rank on Herb. But this time, it's the first time that he's really been pulled rank upon. So it was a good, interesting look into dynamics there. And it was an okay start to the series as far as theming was concerned, because it got you into the spirit of, okay, so we're going to be in a series where Bojack is going to be at ends with the director. He's going to have to try and plow through this TV show. I wonder what it's going to come out with. The only other big point about this episode comes at the very, very end, which will lead me into episode 2. The end of the episode, we find out what my prediction would have been before the episode was, that Mr. Peanut Butter and Diane are divorced.
Right.
After their big fight at the end of series 4, the papers have come through. They're still on talking terms, but Diane has gone off to Vietnam for a couple of months to clear her head. And that moves us on to episode 2, The Dog Days Are Over. Which...
yeah, I mean, you can't really pass it to me because I haven't seen it, so I don't really have much to say. I'm just kind of like sitting back and listening for this one.
This episode is one of the strongest in the series. It's a Diane episode. She's been asked to do something for the magazine that she was working for, Girl Crush, whilst out there in Vietnam. So what she does is she says 10 reasons why you would go to Vietnam. And she bases it around her own life. So it's like getting back to her roots, almost kind of running away from her problems, and it really does go into the psyche of Diane. She gets a new haircut, she changes the style of what she is, she kind of almost goes into a little Miss Saigon kind of relationship with a person who's out there. She tries to escape the Hollywood world, or the Hollywood world, but she can't get back, like she can't escape it. And it's quite a depressing episode in the fact that you really feel for Diane in this situation. And it's probably one of the most emotional moments of the show, where you just see her break down crying when she just says to Mr. Peanut Butter, look, I want to get a divorce. And you see her go into this little apartment, this little kind of rented kind of space with all of her stuff in boxes. And she, for the first time in the show, truly feels alone. Which that's basically what it comes down to.
So does it kind of follow a pattern where each episode tends to focus on more on just like the one person?
It does that for the first part of the series, and then it does for the first 5 or 6 episodes of the series, and then it comes back from episode 7 onwards. It goes into multiple people doing stuff in episodes. Episode 3 is the obligatory Todd episode, which is an interesting one. It cracks a lot of jokes, as would a Todd episode, because he's dating this person who's asexual, the axolotl, who I cannot remember the name of, sadly. But her parents are overly sexual. So I think her mum's a porn star and her dad's like works in the sex industry or something like that. And the entire episode is based around everyone in the axolotl family basically trying to make Todd sexualized. And Yolanda, the axolotl, who is Todd's girlfriend, doesn't tell her parents that she's asexual, and it becomes a massive kind of it's not a strong episode. I'll give it that. It's
you know what, like yeah, I was gonna say Todd has never been one of my favorite characters in BoJack. In season 1, I don't know if it was the case that season 1 didn't know what it wanted to be or what it was doing, but he was very much just that easy comic relief. And then when they tried to give him a story in like season 2 onwards, like I just didn't particularly care about him.
There's one good episode with Todd that I'd say, and that's the one where he says to Bojack, "It's you. Everything that's wrong about yourself, it is you."
Good moment.
And that is the only good moment I'd say he's had in the show. He's had some great funny moments. I like his stuff that he has with Emily. Which does come into this series quite a lot, because there's still some kind of yearning. Emily still yearns for Todd. Todd still kind of wants to be with Emily, but doesn't really want to be like sexual or want to get into a proper relationship with her. So that plays out all the way through the entire series. We'll move on to episode 4.
This is what I've just been reading the titles for the episodes. Bojack the Feminist, episode 4. I'm interested to hear how this goes down.
This is an interesting episode. Basically, the entire premise of this episode is Bojack says one of these stars who they want to bring onto the show, Filbert, is one of those people who's had millions of different scandals in the past and has always kind of said, "Oh, you're okay, you're okay." But Bojack says, "No, I don't want to work with them on set." Suddenly he becomes out of nowhere and like a feminist icon. So he plays to that. So he goes on TV and says, "Oh yeah, you should not strangle women," and stuff like that. And that becomes his almost catchphrase type thing for this feminist campaign. And then we get the return of Anna Spornikopova, his ex publicist, who is the publicist now for this controversial character who's always been let off the hook. She confronts Diane, and Diane finds out about New Mexico, which is probably, to this point, possibly Bojack's worst moment. I still think that's playing in his mind, so having that entire dynamic of him almost sleeping with a 17-year-old when he's like 50-odd, it's still possibly, I'd say, his worst moment until this series happened.
What I will say so far is that I'm noticing a distinct lack of Princess Carolyn as a character. You've mentioned Bojack, you mentioned Diane a lot, and Todd.
Episode 5, the Amelia Earhart story, Princess Carolyn episode. The entire focus of the episode is on the fact that she is now alone. She isn't with Ralph Stilton. She wants to adopt. And she goes and...
Was she told that she couldn't have kids in season 4, or did she have a miscarriage?
I think it was less of the fact that she wasn't told that she had kids. I think it was the fact that she had a lot of miscarriages in the past, and maybe it was a problem with her. And in this episode, it's kind of a past-future episode. So half of it is set in the past, where she like meets a guy from her like local high school. She kind of finds out that she could be good at managing because he's not really confident as a quarterback in the local high school American football team, and she kind of gives him that confidence as like a managerial role. She then ends up sleeping with him, and she gets pregnant. He's quite a wealthy family. Her family isn't that wealthy. It shows Princess Carolyn's parents and how they didn't really support her as a kid because she was possibly the runt of the litter and stuff like that. And it's a heartbreaking episode in the fact that we see Princess Carolyn's first miscarriage, and we see the fact that the person who she thought did like her, the quarterback, only was with her because she was pregnant with the child. And it's quite a sad story in that sense, but it's mirrored completely with the future storyline, the now storyline, which is Princess Carolyn going back to her home place and meeting up with a person who could be a potential donor for the adoption. This episode really plays home the attention to detail in the show. There's, I wouldn't say visual gags, but there's a lot more meta references that are seen in this episode. So you'll see a t-shirt and it'll have like an animal reference on it or something like that, or everything about the universe has become a lot more meta and a lot more kind of focused in, and attention to detail is a bigger subject for the actual show. This episode is a good episode, I'd say. That's not really much more I can say. And as a side plot to the episode, Bojack gets injured from a stunt on set in Filbert. He falls off a building, lands on a car, and that means that he has to be given pills, which comes in later on in the series.
Oh, okay. I'm sensing some kind of overdose or something happens later on.
We
take us on to episode 6.
Episode 6, Free Churro.
So I'm currently looking on Wikipedia, and in terms of the episode list, it tends to just have the title and the director and the writer and when it was originally aired. There are 2 episodes in this series where it actually has a description for what happens in the episode. Episode 6 is one of them, in that Bojack gives a eulogy at his mother Beatrice Horseman's funeral.
Which one's the other one, by the way?
The other one is the following episode, INTSUB.
Oh, okay, got it. I can understand why this one would have a little bit more context. I'll show you what, I'll say what I've written down in my notes here. The best Bojack episode ever, possibly. It is a bottle episode. The episode does start with Bojack being picked up from a football game when he was younger by his dad, Butterscotch. His dad basically says, "You're a worthless child. You're the reason why, like, your mother was meant to pick you up, and I had to kind of come and pick you up. That led me out of my writing. Our writing's the only way we earn money. It's all your fault for being born," and stuff like that. It's a horrible start to the episode for Bojack. And then it goes into basically Will Arnett monologuing for the entire duration of the episode. He's the only person who says a line in this episode because he plays Butterscotch Horseman as well as playing Bojack. This is the best episode of Bojack Horseman ever. I'm saying it now. The way that he articulates in this episode, the way he talks about his mother, the way he kind of recalls his entire life and what she has meant to him, taking into context things that she said in her final moments, taking into context the way he's been treated and the way that it's affected his life, the fact that she's never shown any affection, and the one time where she may have shown affection, it's only really a side pass at him and himself. The fact that she actually did miss being with Butterscotch, Bojack's dad, when he died, and the fact that she actually did show some emotion in her life, and at the end of the episode, Bojack shows that he can live without his mum, he can live without his parents, and he can live out of their shadow. He's his own kind of person. And this entire episode is almost like getting over the fact that his mum has had such a big hold on his life, has always undermined him, has always kind of downgraded him in every sense, has never been proud of him, but he can now be proud of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode isn't just a completely serious episode in that sense. It does throw in possibly some of the best jokes of the series. But honestly, if there's one episode you've got to go see from this series, it's that one. You can watch it in context, you watch it out of context. It's just like fish out of water. It's emotional, and it really does get to you.
I knew that one, because we knew that was coming. We knew there was going to be an episode with the eulogy.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was going to be episode 1. I thought it'd be like pretty close to the start, but the more you're talking about this series now, the more that I wish I had have watched it, like, my opinion on it, because we're usually pretty spot on with.
Well, I did say, like, the first time I watched it through, maybe I was drunk at the time, but I didn't think it was as good as the second time. When I went back and watched it again, it was just phenomenal. The amount of detail they put in this series, the amount of storytelling, the amount of time they would have done to write these episodes and write these ideas down. And that's really displayed with the next episode called Interior Sub, or Int Sub, which is like an unusual fever dream type episode. I actually have not written down enough notes on this episode. Basically, it's Bojack's, or is it Diane's? I can't remember. It's one of the
So this is what the synopsis says on Wikipedia for it. It's got Diane's therapist, Dr. Indira, and her corporate mediator wife, Mary Beth, retell the ridiculous mishaps of their clients to each other, changing their clients' names to protect their identities, describing Bojack as Bobo, the angsty zebra, and Diane as Diana, Princess of Wales. Dr. Indira describes asking her client, Diane, to set boundaries with Bojack. Meanwhile, Mary Beth describes a dispute between Todd and Princess Carolyn over string.
Yes, this has some of the funniest parts and some of the dumbest parts. The Todd and Princess Carolyn part of the episode is by far the dumbest part. It's stupid. It's probably one of the worst storylines they've ever had in Bojack. It's an argument over who ate the last string cheese. It's ridiculous. But the rest of the episode is phenomenal. You've got Mr. Peanut Butter, not Mr. Peanut Butter, it's Mr. Chocolate Spread as the brown Labrador. We've got Diana, Princess of Wales. You've got Bobo, the angsty zebra. Todd is a talking hand. Princess Carolyn is a ball of yarn. It's ridiculous. It's a very well done episode. But the conclusion to the episode is possibly even more kind of telling, because Diane gets into an argument with Bojack, and Diane decides to take over the writing of Filbert, because Flip, the writer of Filbert, is having writer's block, and the whole name of the episode is Interior Sub, because that's all he's written down on this piece of paper. He doesn't know what it means. So Diane turns it into something different. she goes and basically plays out the scene that she's writing like it's New Mexico. And I think this might be the shittiest thing Diane's done to Bojack, because she's obviously trying to tell Bojack that she knows about New Mexico, but she basically makes Filbert about Bojack. No one else knows this other than Bojack. She basically goes and writes it in so that part of the show Filbert has Bojack basically trying it on with a younger person, a 17-year-old girl, and then leaving them. And it's probably the shittiest thing that Diane's done. It's probably one of the shittiest thing anyone's done in the show.
Why does she do it?
She does it because she's pissed off at Bojack. She wants to get the message out, but she doesn't really know how to. She doesn't want to confront Bojack. So instead, she kind of basically puts it in the show that Bojack's doing. So Bojack has to relive out the shitty thing that he's done in his life that he's already regretting. And honest to God, that's probably worse than what Bojack did in the first place. Because it's torture. It's actual torture. It completely changed the complexion of the relationship between Bojack and Diane. And Bojack was really a friend to Diane throughout this entire series, because I hadn't mentioned it in previous episodes, but Bojack helped her move out. Bojack helped her through like the divorce and everything like that. He actually was a friend to someone for once and actually helped out. But now Diane's gone and done that. So this is really where the series starts to take a little bit of a... actually, I'd say a couple episodes later, it takes a more darker turn. But this is where you start to get that kind of infliction of a darker turn possibly happening. Mr. Peanut Butter is also cast in Filbert after this episode.
Right, so that takes us on to episode 8 then. Mr. Peanut Butter's Booze.
So a plot point which I hadn't previously mentioned throughout the series was that Mr. Peanut Butter has started dating someone new now, a person who was a waitress at Bojack's restaurant Elefante. This is Pickles. She is a pug, and she's quite a lively character. She's basically a female version of Mr. Peanut Butter, always going off and kind of almost overhyping everything and getting all kind of riled up and everything like that.
Don't you just hate people like that?
This episode is basically set over 4 different Halloweens with Mr. Peanut Butter's 4 relationships that he's had in his life. So that is his first wife, who I cannot remember the name of. It is Jessica Biel, it is Diane, and it is Pickles. And it's set across these 4 Halloweens. It's quite a fun episode. Probably the funnest episode of the series and one of the funniest episodes of the series. You get to see a younger Todd. You get to see a younger Princess Carolyn, and as they grow up through the different ages. It's Bojack's yearly Halloween party. And every time Mr. Peanut Butter brings someone new to it, they always get into a big fight, which eventually ends up affecting their future relationship and where that goes. And the entire purpose of the episode is to show that Mr. Peanut Butter has had a major fight with 3 people in the past at these Halloween parties, and now he's bringing Pickles there. And Pickles and Mr. Peanut Butter get into that inevitable fight. And Diane actually goes forward and basically comforts Pickles and basically tells Pickles that this is what you're going to be getting into. And she kind of comforts Pickles in that sense, because Pickles and Diane really don't get on that well throughout the entire series. And it's a good end to the episode, I'd say. It's a really good look into Mr. Peanut Butter's psyche. It's a good look into the way that he deals with his relationships. And it's kind of, it makes you think, because throughout the previous series, I've always thought that Mr. Peanut Butter isn't really in control of his own actions. He's just kind of like a dog trying to chase after his own tail. He's always
probably has done at some point in these series.
But this episode makes me think, does he actually know what he's doing in his actions? And it makes me question it, because this is kind of one of the episodes, I'll tell you now, this series made me dislike Mr. Peanut Butter because of his actions. There are some things he does in this series which are very good, which we'll go on to later on. But this series makes me think that Mr. Peanut Butter would rather take things as they come instead of taking responsibility for his own actions. And he'd wait until someone else gets hurt or blamed until he would actually start to take any form of responsibility.
So in the last 2 episodes, one with Diane, and then the next one with Mr. Peanut Butter, it's kind of a shift from their usual style. Like Diane has never really been vindictive as such, but she came across that way, and now there's been that change in Mr. Peanut Butter. And I'm sensing there's going to be about to be a change in Bojack very, very soon as well.
So the next episode, Ancient History, we have the return of Hollyhock. She comes back from her university. She gets a little bit of PTSD when she goes back to Bojack's house. Bojack obviously has his pills, which he's taking on a daily basis. He has to take them because of his back pain. And at this stage, Bojack is still in some form of back pain. Hollyhock sees the pills and flushes them away. And she flushed them away because obviously she was drugged in Bojack's house by Bojack's mum in the previous series. She doesn't really think of it. She thinks, oh, Bojack doesn't need these, so she flushes them away. And that might contribute to the next few episodes of what actually happens to Bojack. Because he thinks, oh, shit, I'm in a lot of pain. I need these pills. He goes over the top, and this entire episode is basically him trying to go around and find these pills or find a substitute for these pills, which are helping him at the time. This episode also has a return to favor of Princess Carolyn. She's once again the downfall of her own happiness. And I say that because in previous series, she broke up with Ralph because she didn't tell Ralph about the previous abortion, or not abortions, but she didn't tell Ralph about the previous miscarriages that she had. She has the opportunity to adopt someone in this episode. And she doesn't directly, but she almost talks her way out of it. And that leads the person to deciding to keep the baby instead of give it away. It's an interesting one because Princess Carolyn is one of those characters where you always want the most positive thing to happen to her. She's the most hardworking character in the series. She always does a lot of things selflessly, and she never really thinks about herself in anything. She never has done. And this is one of those situations where you want her to take that happiness and actually move forward with it, but she doesn't.
Is it the struggle against career and the family again?
It isn't the struggle against career. It's the struggle by the fact that her family, and you see this in the Amelia Earhart story episode, her family never supported her. She's always supported herself. And that means that she's always had to look out for the rest of her family. So she's always had to been looking out for other people instead of herself. And because of that, it's almost like she's got to the stage where, because people like her family keep on telling her, like, you got to look after me, you got to do this, 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 she can't actually look after herself. And it's really sad to see because she is the most likable character in the show. But we'll go back to it later on. We also get introduced to a character called Henry Fondle, who is... I
wonder what he's done.
Well, it's a side plot character that Todd creates because Todd decides to get back with Emily in some way, shape, or form. Emily thinks, oh, okay, this could be good. And he invents a sex robot to basically... I did wait until you drank, by the way. He invents a sex robot that she can get with called Henry Fondle that keeps on saying like lines like call me, I like it when you call me daddy and stuff like that. I'm sure there's a soundboard somewhere where you can get with all the different lines that he says.
It's like the greatest deleted scene from Rocky IV I've ever heard.
And I've completely missed something. Todd is now the top dog manager of whattimeisitRightNow.com, the website which is running the show Filbert.
Right.
I didn't really mention it as a side point, but it does come in a little bit later on. Now we get into the 3 final episodes. And I'll link these 3 together, to be honest.
So we've got episode 10, Head in the Clouds.
Yeah. So Bojack's co-star in the show, Gina, who he's been having like a casual relationship with throughout the entire thing, is starting to grab the headlines because she's been nominated for, or she's been given some Emmy buzz. She's the breakout star of the show. So even though Bojack is the main guy in the show, she is kind of being given all of this praise and everything like that. And Bojack doesn't really like that. So he decides to kind of stick with it and move forward with relationships. So he actually decides to kind of make a move. He says, like, basically, look, not like you're the star of the show or anything like that, but he thinks that by getting closer to her and being shown to be in a relationship with her, he might get a little bit of that publicism coming his way. Diane confronts Bojack at the premiere of Filbert, and they talk about New Mexico, and Bojack says it was a shitty thing you did, basically, by making the show about me. And she says, look, you got to take responsibility for your actions. You got to get it out there in the open. Because she said, because I'm your friend, anything that becomes public or anything that you do looks bad on me. And Bojack says probably one of the most accurate lines of the series, which I'm just going to kind of almost a misquote here, but Bojack says about himself that I have suffered the most from the actions of Bojack Horseman. Like, I am a shitty person.
Like, he lives it on a daily basis.
Like he says, I have to live with everything that I've done. And she says, you can't play the victim in this situation. He says, yes, I can. I have that right. And it's a big argument. It's one of the biggest of the series. It's one of the best conversations in the series that these two have. And the argument breaks down when Diane says the second shittiest thing that she's done all series, when she talks about Sarah Lynn. She says, you can be blamed for all of your you can miss the blame for all of your actions, but you have to take the blame for Sarah Lynn. And Bojack, basically, he doesn't even defend it. He says, okay, don't talk about Sarah Lynn. And she then keeps on going on and on about Sarah Lynn. And Bojack, you could see Bojack, that's the one thing that gets him. He doesn't care what people say about his own actions. He doesn't care about what happens in New Mexico because that's on him. He doesn't care about what happens in the public media and stuff like that. But Sarah Lynn got to him. And when Diane says, like, you have to take responsibility for Sarah Lynn, like, she was doing fine, she was sober, then you go with her, go on a month bender, and, like, she dies. That's on you. And that's shitty. That's real shitty. For a character,
from her perspective, she's coming at it with honorable means, like she's trying to help Bojack purge these emotions and get them out in the open. But in reflection, what she's actually doing is bringing them to the forefront and going to, like, send him into a relapse, probably, of what caused all this depression and suicidal
at this point, Bojack does take a few more pills, more than he would. And he starts to almost hallucinate towards the end of the episode. We then also have Diane finishing the episode by Mr. Peanut Butter taking her home from the party. Mr. Peanut Butter is still with Pickles, and they kind of talk for the first time in, I'd say, like 6 or 7 episodes of the series. And she invites Mr. Peanut Butter inside. And that's how the episode ends. So there's still something there. And Diane does sleep with Mr. Peanut Butter in that situation. We then get on to
episode 10, then, isn't it? Yeah. Or did you combine them?
That was episode 10. Let's get on to the showstopper. Now, episode 11 is usually the top episode, the one that everyone waits for, and this one delivered. This is an episode of Filbert, this episode. But because Bojack's been taking the pills, because Diane has been changing the script and the setting to be like Bojack's life, Bojack doesn't know where the show starts and where his life begins anymore. The lines are blurred to the point where the show bleeds into real life in this episode. And I don't want to spoil much from this episode. There is almost like a mini musical element to this episode. There is almost like that comes as part of, like, the fever dream sequence of Bojack finally losing it. But towards the end of the episode, the plot of Filbert really comes to fruition, because in Filbert strangles his wife to death, and Bojack starts strangling Gina on set. He doesn't realize it's reality. He thinks it's part of the show in his head. And when the cameras are rolling, people are sat there watching. They think, okay, so he's got to strangle his wife for the scene, so he's got to strangle Gina for the scene. Flip says cut, and Bojack keeps strangling. and he keeps strangling, and Flip doesn't really know what to do, so he says, keep rolling. He does something shitty in that sense, but he's like, I don't know what to do, we'll keep rolling. Mr. Peanut Butter steps in and basically drags Bojack away. Gina basically says, what the fuck, because she's strangled. You could see red marks around her face. She's gasping for air. And we get to see a vision from Bojack. It cuts to a room with a staircase. He goes up the staircase. I was always thinking, what's he going to see at the top of that staircase? Is it going to be his parents and they're going to speak to him, like, say one last time, this is why you're shit and stuff like that? But the genius of this show, at the top of the staircase, he doesn't see his parents. He looks up at the sky and he sees himself. And it shows that all of the actions that he's previously done, everything, New Mexico, Sarah Lynn, that can be attributed to something from his past, his parents, his upbringing, something that he's done in his show, the fact that he's not that good of a person, everything like that. But finally, for the first time, it's him. This is nothing to do with his parents. He can't blame anyone else but himself. And this is possibly the most artistic and best shot of the show, cinematography-wise. It's phenomenal. He's looking up at a kind of blimp inflatable version of himself, which is floating above him.
That's on the main poster of season 5, because I was going to try and draw some, you know, analysis from the poster itself, but I'm guessing that's what it's immediately reflecting to.
I'll try and get the photo up because I've actually saved it. So if can I screen share this? I can. So that's the actual photo right there. And it's beautiful. It's phenomenal. It completely shows that Bojack has no one else to blame but himself. And that is probably the moment which made me kind of pause, because that's where the episode ends. It goes silent, and then some calm music starts playing and goes into the credits. And it's probably one of the most reflective moments of the show, because this time Bojack's not only gone too far, but he's now going to have to answer for his actions. Earlier on in the series, in the Bojack the Feminist episode, he actually said, "Don't strangle women." That was his catchphrase.
I was going to say, yeah, it's a bit foreboding, isn't it, for that particular episode?
Now he's his girlfriend, his co-star in the show itself, everything that he's put at risk there. Like, it's crazy. And in the final episode, Gina actually talks about the strangling. And in one of the most kind of overwhelming things that is said in the show, Gina actually says, "Look, I'm going to smile and say nice things to the camera. You don't talk to me ever again, though." And she says, "I don't want my career to be defined by you. I don't want to be known as a person who got strangled by Bojack Horseman. I don't want to be known as that person who was part of, like, this is me misquoting again, but part of that, like, Me Too campaign. I don't want to be always associated with you. I've got my own career to get on with, and I'm willing to take that risk of not putting you down for this, just so that I can have a better career." And it's one of the most saddening things, because obviously we've had the whole Me Too movement, like, people not talking about their problems in the past, not talking about the Harvey Weinstein thing, not talking about anything like that until years later, because they'd rather have that not like a massive shadow over their career. And it's probably one of the most heartbreaking things from the show, because Gina was a great character in the series, probably one of the best new additions to this series. But that really does kind of stop the show in that sense. It really does make you kind of not hate Bojack, but at least hate his actions. We then have all of the storylines finished off. So Henry Fondle becomes president of the company. What time is it now anyway? He says a crude comment to someone because he's a sex robot, and that gets the company whattimesnow.com shut down. So Philbert gets cancelled as a show. So after all that effort, after everything that went into it, it gets cancelled in the end. Not because of Bojack's actions, but because of side plot actions. Princess Carolyn finally adopts from the person who she saw in the episode 5, the person from her hometown. And it's a nice moment, but it makes you wonder what's going to happen next series with her, and whether she's going to be able to juggle her work life with her now home life. Mr. Peanut Butter confronts Diane and says, look, do you want to be with me, or should I be with Pickles? And Diane says, this was just a relapse. I'm not going to be back with you. And Mr. Peanut Butter then has the choice to own up to Pickles, but he doesn't. He proposes to her. And this is why I think Mr. Peanut Butter can't face his actions. This episode really shows it. And I saw a lot of comments from people saying that they were disappointed in Mr. Peanut Butter's actions from this episode. I completely agree. I think that he made the complete wrong decision here. He should have owned up to his actions. And in the end, it just makes you think he's never going to learn. And it's just going to be, Pickles is probably going to end up as another Diane, another... Yeah. It's an endless cycle. And finally, to close off Bojack's and Diane's story, Diane takes Bojack to rehab. She saw everything that had happened on set. She knows everything that's happened, and she wants to do one thing good for him. She says a speech where she used to be friends with this person, and she cared for them, and she wanted to look after them, and she loved them. And then she turns around to Bojack and says, and I care for you, and I want to look after you. She doesn't say the I love you bit, but I genuinely think that she does love Bojack.
Yeah.
And Bojack finally kind of admits on his own problems, admits that he's a bad person, and the series ends with Diane basically driving off back to her normal life, but saying goodbye to her best friend as he's going to be spending however long in rehab now. And that's basically where the series ends. And
so is this going to be a hopeful rehab? Is he going to learn? Is he going to... I think he's going to have to, because I don't think that the series can keep coasting with Bojack at the same plateau of depression and addiction in his life. I think there has got to be a moment. Either he's going to end it, and it's going to end with him committing suicide, which I don't think they will.
That would mirror Secretariat, his hero.
That is true. Or will he, seek to change that from Secretariat? Will he find a way out of it? Will he do some kind of self-help thing eventually? Or I don't know how it's going to end. He's either going to break out of his addiction, and I think if he does, we like bittersweet endings.
We like bittersweet endings. I think the series is going to end a lot like the film Her, and not in the sense of like what actually happens in the plot of Her, but I think the series will end with the implied Bojack and Diane getting together. Maybe not with them kissing or anything like that, but maybe with them giving each other a look.
Yeah.
And knowing that everything is going to be okay from that point on. I think this show is starting to not slow down, but almost kind of ramping towards a climax. This series had a lot of huge plot points, which leads me to think that the next series is either going to be closing it out or setting up for a finale. I wouldn't be surprised if what they do is they release a series, a standard 12 episodes, and then the final episode be like an hour-and-a-half long episode just to close out all the plots. But once again, this series delivered on every single level that I could have expected. We had our obligatory acclaimed character actress Margot Martindale appearance. We had great jokes. Todd episode, of course. Bojack drinking a lot in two of the episodes. We didn't actually have that many horsing around references, which makes me think that now Bojack has probably moved on from that era of horsing around. But once again, this show is one of the best in television right now, and hopefully when they bring out the next series, it's going to be as good as this one.
Did we have to wait a year between season 4 and season 5, or was it like a year and a half? I feel like it was longer.
I want to say, because I want to believe I was out in Austria when we reviewed series 4. I can't remember.
I'm not sure, because you came over for a night out, didn't you? And we when season 4 premiered.
Right. So that was that would have been October again, wouldn't it be? Let's have a look. I'm just having a look across. So The first few series were released August, July, and last two series were released September. So it's one a year.
Okay, that's cool.
So it started in 2014, and we're at series 5 in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we get series 6.
So you'd rank this below season 4, but above the rest, or
on par with season 4? On par.
Wow, so it's amazing what a second sober viewing can do for someone.
But BoJack has always been one of those shows where you have to watch it multiple times to maybe understand what's actually happening on. And
I would like to go back through all the series before rewatching season 5, because it is a year gap and we watch a lot of stuff in between. I don't tend to remember a lot of things. There are quite a few characters. There's a lot of threads going on. There's a lot of subtext. And callbacks. So I definitely think before I watch season 5, sorry, I will have to go back and watch the previous 4 again.
It's a good watch, and you really do get into it. I thought I'd watch like, I don't know, like 1 episode a day. I ended up watching like 10. Mm-hmm. It's one of those where you watch one and you just kind of get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
And the show flows so well between episodes, but can be seen. Some episodes are so well done that they can be seen as like individual episodes. In this series, I would say you could watch maybe episode 2, the Diane episode. You could watch Free Churro. You could watch Mr. Peanut Butter Booze. You could watch Head in the Clouds, Showstopper, and the Show Stopped, all as individual episodes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I'm going to have to get my Netflix on very soon and go back to all of these. Yeah, so the reason that I didn't watch this, we kind of said this at the start. I have been working like a dog this week. I've barely had any time to watch anything, you know, and then reactions in between. That's the reason I didn't get to watch it, which really sucks, because I really would have liked a sort of in-depth discussion back and forth on this one. But
yeah,
you've done a more than admirable job of going through the entire series, coming through all the plot threads, and take notes. That is with a series like this, take lots and lots of notes, which I'm sure you did. I guess that's it then, unless you have any other final closing things on Bojack Horseman season 5.
No, that is it. That's everything.
If you want to round out, then I mean, this was essentially your video.
Thank you for watching today. We were going to be planning to do a film club soon. I know that Chris is going to be doing another reaction video later on today.
2 reaction videos out today.
2 reaction videos out today. Wow, we are really pushing for content right now. We're not sure when the film club is going to be out. Hopefully nearish the start of next week, and
next couple of days. Yeah,
maybe we'll get back on schedule at some point.
Yes, we will.
But anyway, either way, please like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you thought about Bojack Horseman Series 5 or any of the previous series. Be sure to go back and watch our previous reviews of Bojack Horseman. I think we did the series 1, 2, 3. Almost like a summary type thing, and we did a series 4 review in depth as well. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Links in the description.
Links are everywhere. Click the bell icon or whatever that means. And yeah, thank you ever so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.